Luxury car dealer rejected a black woman, then a Rolls-Royce pulled up. The morning sun cast long shadows across the polished marble floor of Prestige Motors, one of the city's most exclusive luxury car dealerships. The showroom gleamed like a palace of chrome and leather, with million-dollar vehicles positioned like precious jewels under spotlights that made every curve and detail shine with an almost otherworldly brilliance. Simone Caldwell pushed through the heavy glass doors, her sneakers making soft squeaking sounds against the pristine floor. At 28, she carried herself with the kind of quiet confidence that came from knowing exactly who she was, even when the world seemed determined to tell her otherwise. Her dark jeans were well-fitted but casual, her cotton sweater simple yet elegant, and her natural hair was pulled back in a neat bun that framed her intelligent brown eyes. She paused for a moment, taking in the breathtaking display of automotive artistry surrounding her. A pearl-white Bentley Continental GT sat center stage, its interior visible through tinted windows that probably cost more than most people's cars. To her left, a midnight blue Aston Martin seemed to purr even while stationary, its sleek lines promising speeds that could make time itself seem irrelevant. But it wasn't the cars that caught her attention first, it was the people. Near the Bentley, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit was deep in conversation with a salesperson who hung on his every word, nodding enthusiastically and gesturing toward various features with the reverence of someone discussing priceless art. By the Aston Martin, another well-dressed gentleman was actually sitting in the driver's seat, gripping the steering wheel while a different sales associate explained the vehicle's performance capabilities with barely contained excitement. Then there was the corner where she stood, completely ignored. Trevor Matthews had noticed her the moment she walked in, of course. 20 years in luxury car sales had taught him to size up potential customers within seconds, and this one didn't fit the profile. Sure, she was attractive and well-groomed, but those jeans and sneakers screamed, window shopper, to him. He'd seen her type before, young people who wandered into dealerships like tourists visiting museums, dreaming about cars they'd never be able to afford. Still, company policy required him to at least acknowledge her presence. He approached with the kind of smile that never quite reached his eyes, his perfectly styled gray hair and tailored suit creating an immediate contrast with Simone's casual appearance. "Good morning," he said, his tone carrying just enough politeness to avoid being outright rude, but lacking any genuine warmth. "Can I help you find something? We have some beautiful vehicles here, perfect for looking." The way he said, looking, made it clear that's all he expected her to do. Simone turned toward him, her expression calm and pleasant. "Good morning. Actually, I'm interested in seeing your limited edition models. Specifically, I'd like to know about test driving the new Continental GT Speed." Trevor's eyebrows raised, and he couldn't quite suppress a small chuckle. The Continental GT Speed wasn't just expensive, it was exclusive, with only a handful available worldwide. The base price started at over $300,000, and that was before any customizations. "The Continental GT Speed," he repeated slowly, as if she might not understand the significance of what she just asked. That's quite a vehicle. Very exclusive. Very expensive." He paused, studying her outfit again. "Are you familiar with the pricing on our limited edition models?" "I have some idea," Simone replied evenly. Trevor nodded in a way that suggested he was being patient with someone who clearly didn't understand the situation. "Well, the thing is, we don't typically allow test drives on vehicles of that caliber without certain prerequisites. Pre-approval, proof of funds, that sort of thing. It's really more for serious buyers." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Around them, the showroom continued its elegant dance of commerce and desire, but Simone felt the weight of every assumption being made about her presence there. "I see," she said quietly. "And how do your other customers typically handle that process?" Trevor glanced toward the man sitting in the Aston Martin, who was now asking detailed questions about the car's track performance capabilities. "Well, our established clientele usually work through their financial advisors or private banking relationships. It's a bit more sophisticated than your typical car buying experience." There it was, the not-so-subtle suggestion that she didn't belong in that sophisticated world. Simone nodded thoughtfully, her fingers absently adjusting the simple gold watch on her wrist. That makes sense. I suppose you need to protect your inventory. Exactly. Trevor seemed relieved that she understood. We get a lot of people who just want to say they've driven a Bentley, you know? Instagram photos, that sort of thing. Nothing wrong with dreaming, but we have to be realistic about who's actually in the market for these vehicles. As if summoned by their conversation, another salesperson approached the well-dressed man by the Bentley, offering him a crystal glass of what appeared to be expensive whiskey. The man accepted it with a casual nod, as if such treatment was simply expected. Would you like me to show you some of our certified pre-owned vehicles? Trevor asked, his tone suggesting this was a generous compromise. We have some beautiful models that might be more appropriate for your budget range. Simone's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes, a spark that Trevor completely missed. That's very thoughtful of you, she said. But I think I'll pass for now. Trevor nodded, clearly pleased that the interaction was wrapping up neatly. Of course. Feel free to look around, though. Sometimes it's nice to dream, right? He turned to walk away, already dismissing her from his thoughts, when Simone spoke again. Actually, I do have one question. Trevor paused, half turning back toward her. I had an appointment scheduled for this morning. Would you happen to know who I should speak with about that? For a moment, Trevor looked genuinely confused. He pulled his phone from his pocket, scrolling through what appeared to be a calendar app. An appointment? I don't see anything scheduled for. He trailed off, studying her face again as if trying to place her. What was the name on the appointment? Caldwell, Simone said simply. Trevor's scrolling became more frantic, his brow furrowing as he searched through the day's schedule. After a moment, he looked up with an expression that mixed confusion with growing irritation. I'm not seeing any appointments under that name, he said, his tone suggesting that she might be mistaken or, worse, lying. Are you sure you have the right dealership? There are several luxury car lots in the city. Simone pulled her own phone from her purse, scrolling to what appeared to be an email confirmation. She showed him the screen briefly, just long enough for him to see the official Prestige Motors letterhead, before putting it away. I'm quite sure, she said. Trevor's jaw tightened slightly. In his experience, people who insisted on appointments that didn't exist were usually trying to create some kind of scene or were confused about their own financial situation. Look, he said, his patience clearly wearing thin. Even if there was some kind of miscommunication about an appointment, our policy on test drives remains the same. We need verification of funds before we can allow anyone to drive our premium vehicles. That's just how we operate here at Prestige. And if I were to provide that verification, then we'd be happy to discuss your options, Trevor said, but his tone suggested he didn't believe such verification would be forthcoming. Simone nodded slowly, taking one last look around the showroom. The other customers were still being treated like royalty, their every question answered with enthusiasm and respect. The contrast wasn't lost on her. I understand, she said finally. Thank you for your time, Mr. Matthews. Trevor Matthews, sales manager. Thank you, Mr. Matthews. I appreciate your honesty about your policies. Something in her tone made Trevor glance at her more sharply, but her expression remained pleasantly neutral. You're welcome, he said. And hey, don't let it discourage you. Maybe in a few years, when you're more established, you know? Simone smiled, a genuine smile that somehow made Trevor feel less comfortable than her earlier neutral expression. Yes, she said. Maybe in a few years, things will be very different. She turned and walked toward the exit, her footsteps echoing softly in the vast showroom. Trevor watched her go, already mentally preparing the story he'd tell his colleagues about another window shopper who'd wasted his time. As the glass doors closed behind her, he couldn't shake the feeling that something about the interaction had felt off, though he couldn't quite put his finger on what. But the feeling passed quickly as another potential customer walked in, this one wearing a suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. Outside, Simone paused on the sidewalk, pulling out her phone. She typed a brief message, her fingers moving with practiced efficiency, then put the phone away and looked back at the dealership's gleaming facade. The morning sun was climbing higher now, and the shadows were beginning to shift. In a few minutes, everything would be different. But Trevor Matthews didn't know that yet. Back inside the showroom, Trevor had already moved on to greeting the new customer, a silver-haired man whose Rolex caught the light as he gestured toward a gleaming Ferrari. But his moment of triumph was interrupted when the glass doors opened again, and Simone walked back in. Trevor's smile faltered. He excused himself from the potential customer and approached her with barely concealed irritation. "Is there something else I can help you with?" he asked, his voice carrying an edge that hadn't been there before. Simone maintained her calm composure. "Actually, yes. I think there might have been some confusion about my appointment. Could you double-check your system? The confirmation email specifically mentioned a 10:30 a.m. slot with the sales manager." Trevor's jaw clenched. He was beginning to suspect this woman was one of those people who created problems where none existed, probably hoping to get special treatment through persistence. "Ma'am, I've already checked our system thoroughly. There's no appointment under Caldwell, and frankly, even if there was some administrative error, our pre-approval policy stands firm. We don't allow test drives without proper financial verification. That's a hard rule here at Prestige Motors." He emphasized each word as if speaking to someone who might not understand English very well. "I see," Simone said quietly. "And what exactly constitutes proper financial verification?" Trevor's patience was wearing thin. Around them, other sales associates were beginning to notice the conversation, and he could feel their eyes on him. The last thing he wanted was a scene that might disturb their genuine customers. "Bank statements, credit reports, proof of liquid assets," he said curtly. "Some of our vehicles require verification of at least $500,000 in available funds. The Continental GT Speed you were asking about? That's closer to requiring proof of 7 figures." He let that number hang in the air, watching for her reaction. Most people would back down at that point, finally understanding they were out of their league. But Simone just nodded thoughtfully. 7 figures. That's quite specific. "It has to be," Trevor said, warming to his theme. "You have to understand, Miss Caldwell, was it? These aren't just cars. They're investments. Status symbols. They represent a certain level of achievement in life." His eyes swept over her casual outfit again, making his point without saying it directly. "Some of our clients are Fortune 500 CEOs, professional athletes, entertainment industry executives. They don't just buy cars, they buy into a lifestyle. A community of people who've reached a certain level of success." Simone listened to every word, her expression remaining perfectly neutral. "And you can tell who belongs to that community just by looking at them?" Trevor paused, sensing potential trouble in the question. "Well, no, of course not. That's why we have verification processes. It's not about appearance, it's about financial reality." But even as he said it, both of them knew that wasn't entirely true. His initial assessment of her had been based entirely on her appearance, and they both knew it. "Of course," Simone said smoothly. "Financial reality." A young sales associate named Jessica, who had been watching the interaction from across the showroom, approached hesitantly. "Mr. Matthews? Is everything all right here?" Trevor shot her a warning look. "Everything's fine, Jessica. Just explaining our policies to Ms. Caldwell." Jessica nodded, but she looked uncomfortable. Unlike Trevor, she had noticed something about the way Simone carried herself, a quiet confidence that seemed at odds with Trevor's dismissive treatment. "Actually," Jessica said carefully, "I could check the appointment system from my terminal. Sometimes appointments get entered under different spellings or—" "That won't be necessary," Trevor interrupted sharply. "I've already handled it." Simone turned to Jessica with a gentle smile. "That's very kind of you to offer, but Mr. Matthews has made the situation quite clear. Apparently, even with an appointment, certain prerequisites would need to be met." The way she said it made Jessica's cheeks redden slightly. She'd been working at Prestige Motors for 6 months, and she'd seen how differently customers were treated based on Trevor's initial impressions of them. Perhaps, Simone continued, it would be better if I simply took my business elsewhere. Somewhere that might be more accommodating to someone like me. Trevor's eyes narrowed. Ms. Caldwell, I hope you're not suggesting that our policies are discriminatory in any way. We treat all customers equally, but we also have standards to maintain. Standards? Simone repeated softly. Yes, I can see that you do. The tension in the air was becoming palpable. Other customers were beginning to glance in their direction, and Trevor could feel his authority being challenged in a way that made him deeply uncomfortable. Look, he said, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a confidential tone. I'm trying to save you some embarrassment here. These vehicles start at prices that most people can't even imagine. The insurance alone costs more than what some people make in a year. I'm not trying to be difficult, I'm trying to be realistic. Simone nodded slowly. You're trying to protect me from embarrassment. Exactly. How thoughtful. Something in her tone made Trevor study her face more carefully, but her expression remained unreadable. Well, Simone said finally, I certainly wouldn't want to cause any embarrassment. For anyone. She turned toward the exit once again, but this time she paused and looked back at Trevor. Thank you for the lesson in financial reality, Mr. Matthews. It's been educational. As she walked away, Trevor felt a strange mixture of relief and unease. He'd handled difficult customers before, but something about this interaction felt different. The way she'd said, educational, lingered in his mind like an echo. Jessica watched Simone leave, then turned to Trevor with a troubled expression. Sir, are you sure there wasn't an appointment? She seemed so certain. Jessica, Trevor cut her off. In this business, you learn to recognize time wasters. Trust me, we just saved ourselves a lot of trouble. But as the glass doors closed behind Simone for the second time, Trevor couldn't shake the feeling that the trouble might just be beginning. Outside, Simone pulled out her phone again and typed another message, longer this time. As she finished and put the phone away, a small smile played at the corners of her mouth. The morning sun was getting brighter, and the shadows were shifting once again. Inside the showroom, Trevor had returned to his previous customer, determined to put the unpleasant interaction behind him. He was in the middle of explaining the Ferrari's performance specifications when Jessica, who had been stationed near the front windows, suddenly froze. Mr. Matthews? She called out, her voice higher than usual. You might want to see this. Trevor didn't look up immediately, annoyed at being interrupted during what could be a substantial sale. Jessica, I'm with a client. Whatever it is can wait. Sir, I really think you should. The sound that cut through her words was unlike anything that had ever graced the street outside Prestige Motors. It was the deep, resonant purr of an engine that didn't just run, it commanded. Every conversation in the showroom gradually died as the sound grew closer, a mechanical symphony that spoke of power, precision, and price tags that existed in a realm beyond ordinary imagination. Trevor's customer, a man who owned 3 luxury vehicles himself, straightened up with genuine interest. Now that, he murmured, sounds like something special. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, they could all see it approaching, a vision in matte black that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The Rolls-Royce Phantom moved down the street with the unhurried confidence of absolute supremacy, its presence transforming the very air around it into something more rarefied. But it wasn't just any Phantom. As the vehicle drew closer, details became visible that made even Trevor's seasoned eye widen. This wasn't a standard model. This was a bespoke creation, customized to specifications that probably cost more than most people's houses. The matte black finish was flawless, broken only by chrome accents that caught the morning light like liquid silver. And then there was the emblem. Mounted on the hood, where the famous Spirit of Ecstasy figurine typically stood, was something different. It was still elegant, still commanding, but instead of the traditional figure, there was a stylized crest, an intricate design that incorporated automotive elements with what appeared to be family heraldry. The words beneath the crest were just becoming visible as the Phantom glided to a stop directly in front of the dealership. Caldwell Motors International. Trevor's blood went cold. The engines purr faded to a whisper, then silence. For a moment, nobody in the showroom moved. It was as if time itself had paused to acknowledge the arrival of automotive royalty. Then the rear door opened. A uniformed chauffeur emerged from the driver's side, not rushed, not hurried, but with the practiced efficiency of someone accustomed to serving people for whom time was the most valuable commodity of all. He moved around the vehicle with military precision, white gloves pristine, his bearings suggesting military or high-end security training. The chauffeur opened the rear passenger door with a ceremony typically reserved for heads of state. And from within the Phantom's luxurious interior, Simone Caldwell stepped out. But this wasn't the casually dressed woman who had walked out of their showroom minutes earlier. Someone had clearly been waiting with a complete wardrobe change. Simone now wore a tailored charcoal business suit that fit her like it had been created by master craftsmen, which it probably had been. Her hair, previously in a simple bun, now fell in elegant waves around her shoulders. Diamond earrings caught the light, and her shoes were the kind of Italian leather that whispered rather than spoke of their astronomical cost. The transformation wasn't just in her clothing, it was in her entire presence. The quiet confidence had been replaced by something else entirely, the unmistakable aura of someone accustomed to having entire industries shift at her word. Inside the showroom, Trevor's face had gone from red to white to a sickly shade of green. His hands were trembling slightly as the full implications of what he was witnessing began to dawn on him. Caldwell Motors International, Jessica whispered, her phone already in her hands as she frantically searched the internet. "Oh my God, Mr. Matthews! Oh my God!" Trevor couldn't speak, couldn't move, could barely breathe. Jessica's voice was shaking as she read from her phone screen. Caldwell Motors International, parent company to 17 luxury automotive brands worldwide, family-owned conglomerate founded in 1952. Estimated net worth. She paused, her eyes widening. Estimated net worth of over $12 billion. The number hung in the air like a physical presence. Outside, Simone was taking her time, surveying the dealership through the windows with the calculating gaze of someone who was evaluating not just a business, but an investment. Her expression was calm, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its composure. The chauffeur remained at attention beside the open door, while other vehicles on the street had begun to slow down, their drivers craning their necks to catch a glimpse of the Phantom and its occupants. Trevor's earlier customer had abandoned all pretense of shopping and was now openly staring out the window. "Is that who I think it is?" he asked, his voice filled with a mixture of awe and excitement. "I heard rumors that the Caldwell family was expanding their direct oversight operations, but I never thought." He trailed off as another figure emerged from the Phantom's front passenger seat. A woman in her 50s wearing a crisp navy suit, carrying a leather portfolio, and moving with the brisk efficiency of a senior executive. She approached Simone with the deference due to someone very high up the corporate food chain. They spoke briefly, the older woman gesturing toward the dealership, while Simone nodded, her expression unreadable. Then, after what felt like an eternity but was probably only 30 seconds, Simone began walking toward the dealership entrance. Her heels clicked against the pavement with a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. Inside the showroom, panic was beginning to set in. Sales associates were whispering frantically to each other, everyone suddenly remembering every interaction they'd had with customers over the past months, wondering if they'd made similar mistakes. Jessica looked at Trevor with something approaching pity. "Sir, what are we going to do?" Trevor opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time in his 20-year career, he was completely, utterly speechless. The glass doors were opening. Simone Caldwell was coming back inside. And this time, everything was about to change. The glass doors opened with the same soft chime they'd sounded twice before, but this time the sound seemed to echo through the showroom like a funeral bell. Every conversation stopped. Every head turned. Even the background music seemed to fade into respectful silence. Simone Caldwell entered with the measured pace of someone who owned not just the moment, but quite possibly the building itself. Behind her, The senior executive followed at a respectful distance, her leather portfolio clutched firmly in her hands. Trevor stood frozen beside the Ferrari, his earlier customer forgotten entirely. Sweat was beginning to bead on his forehead despite the showroom's perfect climate control. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish gasping for air in a tank that had suddenly been drained. Simone's eyes found his immediately, and she approached with the same calm demeanor she'd maintained throughout their earlier encounters. But now, with the context of the phantom waiting outside and the knowledge of who she really was, that calmness carried an entirely different weight. "Mr. Matthews," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the silent showroom. "I believe we were discussing verification requirements." Trevor's voice came out as a croak. Miss Caldwell, we. He swallowed hard, trying to find words that might somehow undo the past hour. "I apologize if there was any misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Simone's eyebrows rose slightly. The senior executive behind her had pulled out a tablet and was making notes, with practiced efficiency. "I'm not sure I understand. Were your policies regarding test drives not clearly explained to me?" "Well, yes, but..." "And did you not inform me that certain vehicles require proof of seven-figure liquid assets?" Trevor's face was now the color of ash. Around the showroom, other customers and employees had formed a loose semicircle, everyone sensing they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. "I did, but you see, if I had known..." "Known what, exactly?" Simone's voice remained perfectly level, but there was something in her tone that made the temperature in the room seem to drop several degrees. The senior executive stepped forward slightly. "Perhaps I should introduce myself," she said, her voice crisp and professional. "I'm Margaret Chin, Senior Vice President of Operations at Caldwell Motors International." She gestured toward Simone with obvious respect. "And this is Miss Simone Caldwell, sole heir to the Caldwell family fortune and recently appointed Director of Strategic Acquisitions." A collective intake of breaths swept through the showroom. Trevor's knees actually buckled slightly, and he had to grasp the Ferrari's side mirror to steady himself. "Strategic Acquisitions," repeated one of the customers, a woman who clearly understood the implications of that title. That means, Margaret continued smoothly, "Miss Caldwell has been tasked with evaluating potential investments and partnerships across our expanded automotive portfolio, including, as of 6 months ago, a controlling interest in Prestige Motors." The silence that followed was so complete that the hum of the air conditioning system seemed deafening. Trevor's face went through several color changes before settling on a sickly yellow-green. "Controlling interest," he whispered. 73%. Margaret confirmed, consulting her tablet. "Acquired through our subsidiary investment firm as part of our vertical integration strategy." She looked up from the screen. "Which makes Miss Caldwell, effectively, your employer." Jessica, who had been standing near the back of the group, let out a small whimper. Several other employees were looking like they might be sick. Simone, meanwhile, had begun walking slowly around the showroom, her heels clicking with metronomic precision against the marble floor. She paused beside the Continental GT Speed she'd originally asked to test drive. "This is a beautiful vehicle," she said conversationally, running her fingers along its pristine hood. $350,000, wasn't it? Trevor nodded mutely. "And you mentioned that only serious buyers with seven-figure liquid assets should be allowed to drive it?" Another nod. Simone pulled her phone from her purse and made a brief call. When she hung up, she turned back to Trevor with that same unnervingly calm expression. "I've just had my financial advisor transfer $10 million to an account at First National Bank, just to ensure we have adequate liquid assets on hand for today's educational experience." She paused beside Trevor, who was now visibly shaking. "The thing is, Mr. Matthews, I wasn't here today as a customer. I was here conducting what we call a mystery audit. We do them periodically at all our holdings to ensure that our brand values are being properly represented." Trevor's voice was barely a whisper. "Brand values? Respect. Excellence. Integrity." Simone's voice was still calm, but each word hit like a physical blow. Values that apparently weren't on display during my visit this morning. Margaret stepped forward again, her tablet ready. Miss Caldwell, shall I begin documenting the specific incidents for the report? Please do. Simone turned to face the assembled crowd of employees and customers. I'd like everyone to understand what we discovered here today. When I walked into this dealership an hour ago, I was judged not on my character, my qualifications, or my ability to purchase these vehicles, but on my appearance. Specifically, on the color of my skin and my choice of clothing. Her words hung in the air like an indictment. I was told that I didn't belong here. That these vehicles were for people who had achieved a certain level of success in life. People who belonged to an exclusive community that I, apparently, could never be part of. Trevor looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. But here's what's truly disappointing, Simone continued. This dealership doesn't just sell cars. It represents our family name. And our name has stood for something for over 70 years, not exclusion, but excellence. Not prejudice, but precision. She gestured toward the showroom around them. Every vehicle here, every service provided, every customer interaction, it all reflects on us. And today, that reflection was deeply, profoundly tarnished. Margaret was typing rapidly on her tablet, documenting every word. So now, Simone said, pulling an envelope from her purse, we need to discuss consequences. The envelope in Simone's hand was cream-colored, heavy stock paper with the Caldwell Motors International letterhead embossed in gold. It seemed to pulse with ominous significance as she held it between her fingers. The entire showroom's attention focused on that single piece of correspondence. Trevor's eyes were fixed on it like a condemned man staring at his own execution warrant. Which, in many ways, he was. Mr. Matthews? Simone said, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected thousands of lives. In the past hour, you have violated every principle that Caldwell Motors International stands for. You have demonstrated prejudice, unprofessionalism, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what luxury service actually means. She extended the envelope toward him. This contains your immediate termination notice, effective as of this moment. Trevor's hand shook as he accepted the envelope, but he didn't open it. He seemed frozen in place, still trying to process the complete reversal of his world. But that's not all. Simone continued, turning to address the other employees who had gathered around. Margaret, please read the preliminary findings from today's audit. Margaret consulted her tablet, her voice crisp and professional. Initial observations indicate systemic issues with customer treatment protocols. We observed differential service levels based on apparent customer demographics, inadequate appointment verification procedures, and staff behavior that reflects poorly on corporate values. She looked up from the tablet. Specifically, we noted that Mr. Matthews was not the only employee to demonstrate problematic behavior patterns. A cold wave of fear swept through the assembled staff. Simone's gaze moved slowly across their faces, seeming to evaluate each person individually. However, she said, and several people held their breath, we also observed positive behaviors that deserve recognition. She turned to Jessica, who looked like she might faint from stress. You, for instance, attempted to help verify my appointment even when your supervisor dismissed the concern. You showed respect and professionalism even when it would have been easier to follow his lead. Jessica's eyes widened in surprise and relief. You'll be remaining with the company, Simone continued. In fact, I'm recommending you for immediate promotion to assistant manager, pending proper training. A soft gasp escaped Jessica's lips. Around her, other employees looked hopeful for the first time since the Phantom had arrived. But Simone wasn't finished. Mr. Anderson, she said, addressing a salesperson who had been working with another customer, you demonstrated exactly the kind of service we expect. Attentive, knowledgeable, respectful to every customer regardless of their appearance or apparent means. Well done. Anderson straightened with pride, clearly relieved to be praised rather than terminated. Ms. Rodriguez, Simone continued, pointing to another sales associate. You showed initiative in offering refreshments to all customers, not just those who appeared wealthy. That attention to universal hospitality is exactly what we want to see. But then her expression hardened again. However, Mr. Barnes and Mr. Sullivan, your behavior during my initial visit was equally problematic. You participated in the dismissive treatment, making jokes and snide comments that you thought I couldn't hear. The two men she named looked stricken. They knew exactly what she was referring to. You'll both be suspended pending a full review, Simone announced. Whether you remain with this company will depend on your willingness to undergo sensitivity training and demonstrate genuine change in your approach to customer service. Margaret was documenting everything, her fingers flying across the tablet screen. No, Simone said, her voice taking on a different tone, one that suggested she was shifting from judgment to action. Let's talk about the future of this dealership. She walked to the center of the showroom, positioning herself where everyone could see her clearly. Effective immediately, Prestige Motors will be undergoing a complete management restructuring. We'll be implementing new training programs focused on inclusive customer service, bias recognition, and the values that truly define luxury, which have nothing to do with excluding people and everything to do with exceeding expectations for everyone who walks through our doors. She gestured toward the vehicles around them. These cars represent dreams. For some people, they represent the culmination of years of hard work and success. Our job, your job, is to honor those dreams, not crush them based on assumptions about who deserves to dream. The crowd was listening intently, hanging on every word. We'll also be implementing a new policy, Simone continued. Any customer who requests a test drive will be accommodated, provided they have a valid driver's license and agree to our standard insurance requirements. Financial verification will only be required at the point of purchase, not before. She looked directly at where Trevor was still standing, clutching his termination letter. Because the truth is, you never know who might walk through those doors. You never know whose dreams you might be crushing, or whose business you might be losing, based on prejudice and assumptions. Her voice rose slightly, carrying to every corner of the showroom. But more importantly, you never know who might be evaluating whether you deserve to represent our family name. Margaret stepped forward one final time. Miss Caldwell, shall I arrange for interim management while we conduct the full restructuring? Yes, please. And Margaret? Simone's voice carried a note of steel. I want this story documented and shared with all our holdings. Let this serve as a reminder that we are always watching, and we will always hold our people accountable to our values. She looked around the showroom one last time, her gaze lingering on the Continental GT Speed. Oh, and one more thing, she said, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I think I will take that test drive now. The Continental GT Speed's engine purred to life with a sound that seemed to resonate through every bone in the bodies of those listening. Simone sat behind the wheel, her hands resting lightly on the leather-wrapped steering wheel, a look of genuine appreciation on her face as she felt the vehicle's power thrumming beneath her. Jessica, now acting as her personal sales consultant, sat nervously in the passenger seat, still processing her promotion and the morning's extraordinary events. Through the windshield, they could see Margaret coordinating with corporate security and human resources personnel who had arrived to begin the immediate transition. This is remarkable engineering, Simone said, testing the car's responsiveness as they pulled onto the open road. Bentley's craftsmanship really is extraordinary. Yes, ma'am, Jessica replied, still somewhat in awe. The twin-turbo W12 engine produces 650 horsepower, and the all-wheel drive system provides incredible stability even at high speeds. Simone glanced at her with approval. You know your vehicles. That's exactly the kind of expertise our customers deserve to hear. As they drove through the city's upscale district, Jessica worked up the courage to ask the question that had been burning in her mind. Miss Caldwell, may I ask why you chose our dealership for this audit? Simone was quiet for a moment, navigating through traffic with the confidence of someone who clearly knew how to handle high-performance vehicles. We'd received complaints, she said finally. Not many, but enough to establish a pattern. Customers reporting that they felt unwelcome, that they were treated differently based on their appearance or perceived economic status. She paused at a red light, her expression thoughtful. Our family didn't build this company to exclude people, Jessica. My grandfather started Caldwell Motors with a single garage and a belief that everyone deserved access to quality and craftsmanship. That vision doesn't change just because the price points have evolved. The light turned green, and they continued their journey through streets lined with high-end boutiques and restaurants. But there's something else, Simone continued. Something personal. Jessica waited, sensing this was important. When I was 16, my father took me to a dealership in Chicago. I was dressed casually, jeans and a sweater, not unlike how I was dressed this morning. The salesperson took one look at us and assumed we were there to waste his time. He had no idea that my father was considering a fleet purchase for our executive team. Simone's grip on the steering wheel tightened slightly. That salesperson's behavior cost his dealership a $2 million contract. But more than that, it taught me that prejudice isn't just morally wrong, it's bad business. They had driven beyond the city center now, and Simone guided the Continental onto a stretch of highway where its true capabilities could be appreciated. The acceleration was smooth and powerful, the kind of effortless performance that justified every dollar of the vehicle's price tag. Today wasn't just about one dealership or one sales manager, Simone said as they cruised along the open road. It was about setting a standard. Word of what happened this morning will spread throughout our entire network by tomorrow. Every manager, every salesperson, every receptionist will know that we're watching, and that discrimination of any kind will not be tolerated. Jessica was taking mental notes, understanding that she was witnessing history being made. But it's also about opportunity, Simone continued. People like you, who showed integrity under pressure, who stood up for what was right even when it wasn't easy, those are the people we want leading our organization. As they turned back toward the dealership, Jessica could see crowds of people gathered outside. News vans were setting up, and social media was already buzzing with videos and photos of the morning's events. The story was spreading exactly as Simone had predicted. Miss Caldwell, Jessica said carefully. What happens next? Simone smiled, the first truly relaxed smile Jessica had seen from her all day. Next, we prove that luxury isn't about exclusion, it's about excellence. We show the world that treating people with respect and dignity isn't just the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. They pulled back into the dealership's parking lot, where the matte black Phantom still sat like a monument to the morning's transformation. Margaret approached as they exited the Continental, her tablet filled with the day's documentation. Everything's been arranged, Margaret reported. The story is already trending on social media, and we've received calls from 3 major news networks requesting interviews. The corporate communications team is coordinating the response. Simone nodded, but her attention was drawn to something else. A young black woman, probably in her early 20s, was standing outside the dealership with her parents, all 3 of them staring at the vehicles in the showroom windows with the same mixture of desire and hesitation that Simone remembered from her own youth. Without a word, Simone walked over to them. Good afternoon, she said warmly. Are you folks interested in seeing anything in particular? The young woman's father looked surprised but pleased. Well, my daughter just graduated from medical school, and we were thinking about celebrating with something special. But we weren't sure if you'd be welcome here? Simone finished gently. The man nodded, looking embarrassed. Simone's smile widened. You absolutely are. In fact, I insist that you let Jessica here give you the full VIP treatment. And please, don't worry about any verification requirements. If you're celebrating a doctor in the family, that's all the qualification you need. As Jessica eagerly led the family into the showroom, Simone turned back to Margaret with satisfaction. This, she said, watching the family's faces light up as they explored the vehicles that had once seemed beyond their reach, is how we rebuild a legacy. The Phantom's engine started with its characteristic whisper of power, and as Simone settled into the back seat, she could see the reflection of the new Prestige motors in the window, a place where dreams were honored, not dismissed, and where the color of someone's skin mattered far less than the content of their character. The shadow of prejudice that had darkened the dealership that morning was finally lifting, replaced by something far more valuable: hope, respect, and the promise of a more inclusive future. As the Phantom pulled away from the curb, Simone knew that this was just the beginning. By tomorrow, the story would be everywhere. By next week, every Caldwell Motors holding would have new policies in place. And by next month, the entire industry would be watching to see what real luxury service could look like. The revolution had begun with a single test drive request. Now it would reshape an entire industry.